All right, guys, going to be jumping into the Monday Night Football games here for NFL DFS on DraftKings. Now, as always, I do like to start out with the game previews that we have here. So we got Philly versus Tampa Bay. Let's check the injury report here. Nothing, I guess, like too crazy. Eagles are still a little bit banged up on defense, and also worth noting, Quez Watkins, a guy that does get a decent amount of snaps for them. He's going to be out. Boston Scott's out with a concussion as well, so very interesting to see if like Rashad Penny's going to be active in this one, but I think it's going to be Swift, and I think it's going to be Kenneth Gainwell. We noticed that Kenneth Gainwell is going to be active. On the Bengals side of it, I guess noteworthy is Chase Edmonds not being there. That's just going to lead to more playing time for Sean Tucker. And then for the Rams versus Bengals, obviously we're waiting on news on Joe Burrow, and then we also know that Irv Smith Jr. is going to be doubtful. That does kind of change maybe who we're looking at a little bit for pass catchers, especially maybe more for a showdown slate. For the Rams, they are pretty healthy. We don't expect Puka to really be limited at all, so that's all good news. Looking at the game lines for them, both games are scheduled to be pretty close, which I love. That just adds to a little bit more consistency to the players that we want to be on. We don't have to worry about blowouts being a big factor. That can always happen. Like the Cowboys kind of just got blown out by the Cardinals, which I would say the Cardinals winning, not too shocking. The Cardinals have actually looked pretty good, or even being competitive, not too shocking, I would say. Them kind of manhandling the Cowboys, that was a little bit shocking. So you never know for sure, but it is nice to see that both games are not projected to be blowout. All right, so looking at this, obviously it's going to be a 2-game slate. I am going to go through and touch on the props as well, but let's just go, or not props, the game by game for showdown purposes as well. Let's just touch on the quarterback plays. To me, it's kind of obvious. I think we want to be rolling with Matthew Stafford, just how much he's been throwing. You kind of expect him to maybe get a couple more touchdowns here as well. Kyren Williams has been extremely efficient scoring the football, rushing it, and maybe that's not going to go away, but at the same time, you do expect some of these pass catchers to start catching some passes, especially when he's throwing the ball as well as he is and as much as he is and for as many yards as he has been. Like if you just give him like 2 touchdowns in either of these games, those are really big games. I do expect this game against Cincinnati to be much more of a shootout. Now, obviously, a lot of people are just going to default to Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying that's a mistake. He probably will be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate, but it's just the price difference, right? I think we're going to get the best bang for our buck with Matthew Stafford. For what it's worth, some people might be rolling with Baker Mayfield. I struggle with it. He does get another good matchup against Philly, seemingly, but between Minnesota and Chicago, this probably should be the most difficult matchup thus far. He is going to fall off here eventually. Like that Chicago defense, we know it's just bad. So I think it's more of that. And given the price difference of only being $100 difference from Matthew Stafford, he feels like a much safer play. So let's roll with Matthew Stafford. And then from there, I do think Joe Mixon is just kind of the safe, easy play, especially if Joe Burrow is banged up. I thought last year Mixon kind of did not pop too much. And then last week happened, and he's kind of had more bounce in his step, I thought, but maybe it was just due to them needing to give him the football because Joe Burrow obviously being banged up and whatnot. I kind of see him being a focal point in this game plan for them. And so at this current price tag of 6.3, I do think we want to be rolling with him. And then from there, Kyren Williams, he probably will be chalk, but he'll be chalk for a good reason. He basically has not been leaving the field. He did leave the field partially for his clone in Rodney Rivers. If you guys played preseason DFS, you know he was kind of a goat for us with that. But both players, I would say, are good. And my only worry with Kyren Williams is that he has had such a big workload, and he is kind of, I mentioned it in the props video, I mean, he is like the biggest small body running back that there is. He plays a lot bigger than he actually is. Very hard-nosed runner, and eventually I think that those hits are going to add up on him. Now, I don't think that's going to happen this week, but like CMC with the Niners this last Thursday Night Football, we saw a lot more Elijah Mitchell because it's just not that sustainable giving him that much work. At the same time, I really don't see that happening maybe this week. I do think Kyren Williams is still going to be the focal point in this running game, and he's really looked good doing it. And if we look back on Sean McVay's track record, a lot of the reasons why people liked Cam Akers as a draft pick this year, I did not. I was telling you guys not to do that, was because he was highly productive at the tail end of the season last year. So the RB1 in this offense is just highly productive. So we are just going to be hammering him home. He's going to be high owned, I know, but it feels like the correct decision. And from there, like, we could take a guess on either Kenneth Gainwell or DeAndre Swift, but like the start of the lineup process seems pretty easy thus far. Receiver wise is where the slate gets so interesting. I kind of want to start with Trey Palmer because I really love his price, basically minimum price. He's going to be more of a showdown play, but the Eagles really do struggle on routes across the middle. I could see him be used in that way for this game, and so it's just an interesting play. And I would say Chris Godwin, I don't really get this price tag. I know he hasn't had that big, massive game just yet. He's playing a lot, getting a ton of targets. I think we can basically lock in around 10 DraftKings points. To me, he's kind of the first receiver I want to be targeting, especially between him and Mike Evans. Now, Mike Evans has been used in the way where Baker Mayfield trusts him. He's given him a lot of jump balls, a lot of balls for Mike Evans to go out and win, and he has been winning them. So it's kind of more to me. And the Eagles do struggle across the middle a little bit more. And that's not exactly where Mike Evans dominates, but it's more to me like, all right, we've seen Mike Evans dominate twice. We know both of them are talented. Eventually it's going to come back to Chris Godwin's way. So I kind of expect that to be this week. And guys, the biggest issue on this slate I'm going to have is that I feel like we should be choosing one receiver from each team. Heck, if these receivers were all on the main slate, it would have made the main slate less straightforward than it was, because they're all solid. Like Jamar Chase, due for a big game. AJ Brown as well, due for a big game. Devonta Smith finally getting priced correctly. I probably like him a little bit more than AJ Brown still, but it's definitely more of a toss-up this week. Look at Puka Nacua. Given how productive he's been, we can easily say that this price tag is super cheap. Like, we should just be plugging and playing him. I will say Tutu Atwell still also too cheap for the amount of targets and production he has had as well. Like, I think with Chris Godwin, we're locking in 10 DraftKings points. I think with Tutu Atwell, we're going to be locking in 10 DraftKings points as well. And so it sucks because I'm definitely favoring more of the LA Rams here, and that's not too sexy, but although they have looked good on offense, like, I'm more trusting Sean McVay with this build thus far. I do think we want to be going forward receivers. I do like T. Higgins as well. I mentioned with like AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, there should not be that big of a price discount. I would say for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, that there should not be that big of a price discount. I'm going to say for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, there absolutely should not be that big of a price difference. Now, maybe it's the Joe Burrow factor where if he doesn't play, maybe Jamar Chase is more usable because he's probably going to get a few more design plays. But if Joe Burrow's active, and it seems like he's going to be, there should not be this huge price difference. Like T. Higgins, I think if the game in week 1 wasn't a rainy game, Joe Burrow connects with him for 2 touchdowns as well last week. He had a big game against Baltimore. Like, I don't get this price tag. Let's just go ahead and hammer that price discount. Tight end wise, I'm just going to be rolling with Cade on. Expected to play a lot of snaps. Once again, the Eagles do struggle a little bit more across the middle than you would expect. So I love the price tag. Very easy to fit him in there. The issue with that is that we have a ton of salary left over. That's the nature of the 3-game slate. And so I'm probably going to be favoring more of the showdown slate. For defense, probably Philly. Bucks I don't hate. It's probably going to be one of those two. Probably Philly for now. You could go up to Dallas Goedert in this build just because we have the salary left over mine as well. And this is a weird slate where I might be fine leaving salary left over on the board. Like, it's a very safe build that we have right now. Probably a little bit chalky, but this is a way for us to get unique is by leaving a little bit of salary left over on the board, knowing that we have a pretty good build. And then just looking at both the showdown slates. So we got Philly versus Tampa. Let's just go through this. Much more difficult, I will say, than maybe some of the other showdown slates that we've had. Shout out to Ronnie Bell, right? There we go. Thursday Night Football. That was pretty awesome. Gave you guys 5 out of the 6 plays in the GPP winning lineup. Pretty good there. That's the second time I've done that already this season on showdowns. But looking at, so Chris Godwin, once again, at his current price tag, I just feel like that's too cheap for the player that he is, for the consistency as a player he is as well. So I'm just going to be hammering him home. Dallas Goedert, you would almost say if he's going to get us 7 targets again, like, this is too cheap of a price tag as well. Both Chris Godwin and Dallas Goedert feel like more of cash plays. Like, if you are making a cash build, and this is kind of weird because I typically don't differentiate the two on showdown slates, but it does seem to kind of be a slate in which we could do that. So you could be playing Dallas Goedert there. And I say that because, like, someone like Kenneth Gainwell is extremely cheap. We saw him be the RB1 in week 1, and then it was DeAndre Swift just dominating. Now we're getting a big price difference there. It's tough to say which one it's going to actually be. I would probably favor Kenneth Gainwell there. But you might end up just going with whichever one is going to be lower owned. Sean Tucker could be someone that gets more snaps with Chase Edmonds out. He struggled against the Bears, and I don't know. I was kind of hyped about him as a prospect, and I thought he landed in a great spot to maybe take over for Rachaad White. Rachaad White has best game as an NFL player last week, most impressive game, and I've kind of soured on that take. I would say it's a bad take. I've had like 2 really bad takes, I would say, thus far. I was really loving Juwan Johnson as a fantasy asset, and I thought Sean Tucker would have a good chance to take over as the RB1. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had way more better good takes, guys, but for me, it just feels like we should be really trying to go out of our way to plug and play these 3 players. And then obviously we don't have that much salary left over. And, you know, we're going to be trying to find some value, right? We just know that for sure. And to me, the one that kind of sticks out to me is going to be Trey Palmer. And when we look at it, like, his snaps have been going up. I do want to call it Tompkins as well. Both of these two really stood out in preseason. Now, it was Trey Palmer with the stats during the preseason, but Tompkins was a player that I'm like, whoa, that guy is a fun player to have on your offense because he's kind of a gadgety player. So both plays, I think, are not going to give you 0 points. And so because of that, we could be looking at both of them. Now, on the flip side of that, we do know that Philly is going to be without who? Quez Watkins, right? He's playing 79% of the snaps. And then who is probably going to take over for him? It seems like Zacchaeus, the old Atlanta Falcons receiver. And maybe we see just more 2 tight end sets as well. I think that was more just due to the game last week rather than what our expectation for this week should be. So to me, I think Trey Palmer is going to be the easiest value play in this game. Now, I'm not saying playing in the captain spot, but very cheap price discount. I do think Tompkins will not get you a 0. I don't think he's going to be a good value play for you, but maybe Zacchaeus, and I don't love this either, guys, but maybe he's someone that can have for some salary relief. And then that being said as well, Kadon, just at his current price tag, does seem to be too cheap. He's someone that I like props wise, and they have the line set at 6.5 for a fantasy score, which correlates with what DraftKings has. If he can get us around 7 DraftKings points at his price tag, that certainly seems to be a little bit too cheap. And so here's what my kind of first look build would be for that Monday Night Football game. We get the value in Trey Palmer. We get Chris Godwin at just a very cheap price tag. You would say Mike Evans went off the first 2 games. Chris Godwin probably going to be likely to do it this game. The biggest worry that I have here is that 4-2-2. I don't know if that's the right split, although I think we are getting the top 3 scorers on the slate by going with the Eagles. Now, if you want to go with, let's say, Kenneth Gainwell instead of Dallas Goedert, you could easily do that as well. Like, you have plenty of salary left over. And now looking at the LA Rams versus the Cincinnati Bengals, this one to me is going to be the most fun game. You guys already know, just based off of my previous coverage for the main slate, that I'm probably liking both Stafford and Puka Nacua, and then Kyron Williams, and then T. Higgins. Like, to me, that just makes a lot of sense. And even Joe Mixon, like, I feel like those are just kind of simple plug-and plays. Now, I would say Tutu Atwell, he's probably priced correctly on this slate as opposed to how he's priced on the main slate. It's kind of weird how they differentiate there. That being said, like, I feel like either Puka or Tutu are eventually going to score a touchdown here. We saw Van Jefferson drop a touchdown 2 weeks ago. A receiver needs to catch a touchdown. And so it does kind of feel like a bet between those two. But if we're trying to find a value, and I'm so mad at their pricing of this. I really thought Ronnie Rivers might be a cheap $200 play that we could be on that would get us like 5 or so points. Like, if they do more of a split backfield, I thought that would be a big edge for us, but I don't think it's worth the risk necessarily at that price tag. So really the value that we might be finding on the slate would be the backup to Irv Smith, which when we look at the snaps, it might be Drew Sample. That's kind of what it would seem like. And we can see they've been very top heavy with their snap. Like, Tyler Boyd might be a sneaky play as well. I don't love him, because it does seem to be funneled to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, but obviously he's someone that can always pop off a big play. And heck, maybe they just go a lot more 10 personnel instead, and we see a little bit more Trenton Irvin in this game rather than them giving us another tight end, because Irv Smith is basically like having a receiver out there. So maybe we see more 10 personnel. For those of you guys that don't know what 10 personnel, that's just 0 tight ends in there. And so they'd be adding an extra receiver. And I don't know, Tanner Hudson, we know he's the preseason go at tight end. I would love to see him get some work. I'm not expecting that. If it does happen, I'm certainly going to be cheering for it. But yes, we got Drew Sample at an extremely cheap price tag. I'm not saying I want to roll with it, but it is like, if you need to, you can go with it. Trenton Irvin as well. That is maybe something we could see. And so that's the issue I'm having on the slate, is that there really isn't a good way to get all the best plays on the slate into your build, because you're going to have to sacrifice somewhere. And maybe that's just going off of Matthew Stafford, who I think is going to have a good game, but maybe that's just going off of him and going with more of a balanced build. And so maybe go Tutu Atwell then. And then let's see, can we fit? We can't. I was hoping we could get Tyler Boyd in the captain spot. We can't. Like, I wouldn't love this build, but it does make some logical sense there. Obviously, we don't love the fact of fading Jamar Chase, but given the pricing on the slate, it does make a lot of sense to me. Brett Maher, the kicker, I feel like is a lot of people are just going to naturally end up on him. Let's see if we can rebuild this bad boy. Let's go with Tutu. He's been getting a ton of work. Put him in the captain spot. Let's see where we end up. 3.5. Rams D. Don't love that either. This is stressful. This is like the first slate in which I feel like I can't give you guys a well thought out, like really ideal build. So this to me is going to be kind of more of a fun one, because it's less straightforward of the line of path that we should be going in on. This is so interesting. I will say, now looking at it, it doesn't make as much sense to be on both T. Higgins and Joe Mixon. I would say let's choose one or the other. Either it's going to be a pass heavy game or it's not. Maybe that's the script that we can find. I do really love the price tag on Joe Mixon, though. I feel like with Joe Burrow banged up, that's going to be the route that they go. But obviously, we can get a little bit better of a build by doing that. Not as good, but it's okay. Now that I'm like making this build, I thought the slate would be the one we would want to attack it, but maybe more of on the main slate is where we're targeting this game. I think that's going to be the best approach. All right, guys, that's going to be all for this video. If you guys want access to my 9-to-5 lineup optimizer, that is available for just $10 a month, as well as all the tools, props related and whatnot on the website. Take a look. Links in the description below, as well as the link to ODDSJAM, which gives you a big edge on sports betting. Make sure to check that out. Use promo code 905 to get 25% off at their website as well. All right, let's have a good slate. As always, let's keep cashing.